Welcome back to Small Battalion. I'm Sandra Battaglini, and Small Battalion is a new podcast. We're 3 eps in, we're loving it, and we can add that to the staggering list of 1,750,000 podcasts worldwide. And now Small Battalion makes it 1,750,001. So enjoy. I mean, do we need another podcast? No. But what are you going to do? We're in lockdown. We need to say some shit. This episode, we'll be talking about soil, Mother Earth, Pachamama, Skakamakwe, the giver and sustainer of life, and how oil has fucked soil shit up. Oil needs to stay in the earth, you know? It didn't ask to be sucked out, but big business saw an opportunity and went in for the kill. We're focusing on soil specifically because of the farmer protests that have been happening in India. They've been going on for a long time, but they blew up just before the end of last year. And they're really telling of what's going on in the world right now. To provide context to these protests, we're going to take a look at Vandana Shiva. Now, if you don't know who she is, you should. She is a seed and environmental activist, a food sovereignty advocate, and an anti-globalization author. She's been prolific and profound, especially during the pandemic. Her views on this crisis are crucial to understand the conditions that have converged to create what she calls a triple crisis. But more on that later. Before we begin, I want to share a prophecy with you that I learned several years ago. It's the Black Snake Prophecy. An Indigenous man shared this with me at Eula's Hair Salon on Gerrard Street East. I don't know if you know Eula's, but great salon. So the Black Snake Prophecy is this. The elders predicted that a black snake would weave through North America and it would poison all the land and the people and the water around it. It was the pipelines. They didn't know it at the time. And that the choice would be either to follow the black snake or to go back to the red road, back to Mother Earth. And I take this prophecy further and I say that America took this black snake, weaved it around the planet with Hollywood at the helm, telling everybody, hey, look at us. Okay, look at how great we are. And then either by force or manipulation or invasion, economy started to flip Americano style. Side note, the coffee drink Americano originated during the Second World War when American soldiers were stationed in Italy. And they added more water to the espresso coffee to make it taste like the coffee from home. This is why, even today, Italians here in Canada differentiate between espresso and café canadese, or l'acqua schiarita, they call it, dirty water. And let's be honest, American empire really knows how to dirty the waters. Am I right? So when farmer protests erupted in India and around the world at the end of 2020, as a response to 3 farm acts that passed in Parliament, mostly by Sikh farmers, a fundamental debate arose. Farmer unions declared these acts to be anti-farmer and pro-corporate, and the government was like, no, weary farmers. These acts will help you to sell your wares to big producers. It's basically a bid to deregulate the agricultural market and open up the land to private corporations. Now, according to Vandana, if these laws are not repealed, they will destroy what is still the biggest food system of the world. Real farming by real farmers, created and sustained by small farmers over thousands of years. I mean, can big business just shut the fuck up already? I mean, how much bigger do you need to be? How much more of the land do you need to monopolize and brutalize while robbing individuals of their rights? Their right to feed themselves, their right to grow their own food. Why the fuck does Bill Gates, who isn't a motherfucking scientist, or a doctor, or a farmer, or an epidemiologist controlling and directing global policy right now? It makes me insane. I just found out he attended a meeting of the Toronto mayors. GTA, think of the GTA. I can't even get a meeting with Toronto mayors, okay? And I'm from Toronto. Why are we consulting with a man who, first of all, is not Canadian, and secondly, who has committed extraordinary damage in India and in Africa, specifically through AGRA, which is the Alliance for a Green Revolution in Africa? They did the same thing in India, but India kicked them the fuck out. It cannot be understated just how dangerous this man is and how inextricably linked the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is to efforts to remove tribals and farmers from their ancestral lands to implement monocropping and GMO food systems. I mean, have become obsessed with Bill Gates, okay? I've been dreaming of this motherfucker, all right? I had this dream that he came over to my house and squeezed himself beside me and my friend. And I was like, look at this guy. Not even social distancing. Like, he had to sit between us. It made me uncomfortable, you know? So I was like, Gates, can you give me a minute? I gotta go inside. And so then I go inside and I text everybody I know to say, you wouldn't believe who is over here right now. And then before I go outside, I think, you know what? I should change my clothes. I should freshen up. Bill Gates is outside my house. And then the dream ended. While he put himself beside me and my friend, he was trying to convince me of his plan. He was really weaselly. It does feel very dystopian at the moment, but it also feels like we're building new ground for a new solidarity and freedom. Especially when you consider that 250 million people showed up to a general strike in protest in October in India. Biggest strike ever recorded. That's massive. And based on what prophets are prophesizing and astrologers are laying down, things were about to shake up. For many, December 21st, 2020 was the beginning of the age of Aquarius. When the moon is in the seventh sign. Is that right? And Jupiter aligns with Mars. I've been to Jupiter 3 times now. I know you're like, how the fuck did that happen? I've been doing some esoteric work with people who guide you through like imaginal planes. And honestly, I've felt the energy of Jupiter. So if you want more information on that, email smallbattalion@gmail.com. So Age of Aquarius is about openness and community, which is in stark contrast to the Age of Pisces, which was the last 2,000 years, which was about hierarchy and secrets. An opinion piece in the CBC by Raj Ajala and Jagadish Man, who are of Punjabi descent, say these protests threaten their culture, which is rooted in the land. They talk about how many Sikh immigrants to Canada continued their farming traditions, and those that settled in the Okanagan helped revive BC's fruit farming sector, tending to the apple, cherry, and pear orchards. I never knew this. This is so beautiful. I get so excited when I get cherries from BC. And you know what? Even Niagara Falls. What are you talking about? Amazing cherries. Ajala and Mann describe how Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, which emerged out of the Punjab area, tilled his own fields. In Sikh scripture, there are metaphors to cultivation, harvests, and the seasons everywhere. And in the Japji Sahib, the Sikh morning prayer, there is a line that says, Pavana Guru Panipati Mata Darata Mahata, which means air is teacher, water is father, earth is mother. I recite this prayer probably hundreds of times. I practice Kundalini Yoga, and this is the prayer for the soul. The traditions of Kundalini Yoga and Sikhism are intimately intertwined. The Japji Sahib is a 31-minute prayer or meditation that took me months to learn, okay? But when I finally memorized it, it was like I'd always known it, that somehow it was stored in my spinal cord. It brings absolute peace. I highly recommend it. So let's take a look at Vandana. As I said, over the last several months, Vandana has been all guns a-blazing, lambasting Gates, Zuckerberg, Bezos, who she refers to as pirates, turning this pandemic into a gold rush by forging it into the final frontier of our minds and our bodies. According to Vandana, the actual pandemic, quote, is a result of the idea that we are separate from nature and that some powerful people can invade every organism, every seed, every ecosystem without consequence. This is the mechanistic, extractive worldview. It gave us the coronavirus, but many other infectious diseases. We say it's time to turn to a pandemic solidarity with other species, recognizing that we are part of one family. I love this. This is my jam. She says the extractive industry is trying to gain new ground. Its last attempt. Now turning our bodies and our minds into the new raw materials. But how long can a system that does not nourish community, does not nourish the earth, can last? A one-way extractivism is a non-sustainable collapsing project. That's why we have the extinction crisis. That's why we have the climate crisis. And that's why we have social breakdown.
Vandana Shiva, welcome back to Democracy Now!
My joy to be with you again.
It's great to have you with us. The title of this book, Oneness versus the 1%. Explain.
Well, oneness is the recognition that A, we are part of one planet and we are one humanity. And unless we live with that consciousness and shape every moment of our production and consumption with that consciousness, we are going to destroy ourselves, which we are. The melting of the glaciers is one of the very severe indicators. The 1%, of course, is the symbol of the concentration of wealth under the rules of the neoliberal economies that are basically, on the one hand, turning every natural resource into a war zone. Even the Venezuelan issue is really a war over oil. But war over seeds, that's my life's work, to keep seeds free, because they literally are war over control of seeds by a poison cartel of three. Monsanto and Bayer, Syngenta and ChemChina, Dow and DuPont, all of them with their roots in Hitler's Germany, and finding chemicals to kill people. No wonder they're still killing people. No wonder they're killing our butterflies and our bees and our pollinators. And every indicator showing we are not just in a severe climate catastrophe, we are in the 6th mass extinction, and both the species extinction and the climate catastrophe are two sides of the same coin.
She says we need to move forward with a circular economy. This is the solidarity economy. She implores us to create a world beyond the oligarchs, beyond the billionaires, beyond the extractors. They don't have a vision beyond profit and limitless greed. So I just finished reading her book, Soil Not Oil, that was published in 2008. And it shows how there are 3 crises happening simultaneously. The food crisis, which she says poses the most immediate threat to the survival of the poor. The industrialization of agriculture and the uprooting of peasants and family farmers from the land, which is the basis of the current protests in India, is what we now have to resist. So fast forward to present day. And Vandana asserts that we are witnessing multiple pandemics at once. The coronavirus, the hunger pandemic, and the destruction of livelihoods. We see this in our communities right now, for crying out loud. We're a year in. This is no mistake. It's calculated. Vandana says all 3 pandemics have their roots in the model of the neoliberal economy of corporate rule and deregulation of environmental laws. Otherwise, why would the Amazon be burning? And burning it is. The total of 448 football fields. Deforestation increased by 55% during the first 4 months of 2020 in the Amazon. And you know, when I was looking for the stats of Amazon burning, you know what came up? The company and how much money it had made. Is it a coincidence this fucker named his company after the forest? I don't know. But he's got to change his name. According to the International Labor Organization, 1.6 billion formal economy workers, representing the most vulnerable in the labor market, out of a worldwide total of 2 billion and a global workforce of 3.3 billion, have suffered massive damage to their capacity to earn a living. This is due to lockdown measures and because they work in the hardest hit sectors. According to the World Food Program, 250 million additional people will be pushed to hunger and 300,000 could die every day. In a talk with David Suzuki last summer, when asked what cracks did COVID reveal, Vandana said,
I think the first crack for me that the virus is exposed is in this model of limitless growth, which is based on limitless greed and limitless extraction. And therefore, ever since the days of the early conquest 500 years ago, treating limits as an obstruction that must be removed. Whether they be planetary limits or they be ecosystem limits or they be species limits, after all, of the 300 new infectious diseases, most have come from the forest where an ecosystem has been invaded. And in those ecosystems are people, are animals, and these viruses are not deadly in the forest, but they become deadly when we drive these viruses out of the forest.
I mean, when I learned that, I was like, yes, ma'am. This explains to me why this virus attacks the lungs so violently. After all, the trees are the lungs of the planet. I live in Toronto, and these lands were home to a rich ecosystem of biodiversity of people, plants, and animals. These are the traditional lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit River, the Huron-Wendat, and the Seneca. And I realized a couple of years ago that we still live in the forest. We've just cut down all the trees. Indigenous people call this an occupation. And that the land here is calling to us the loudest because it's covered by cement. That blew my mind because I've never thought about it. I just accepted cement. My people have contributed massively to the spread of cement. If there's something that makes them uncomfortable, they're like, put some cement, This is like, it's like Tourette's. They can't handle it. But I just want to say this last thing about the trees. So when there are no trees, right, around in cities, well, it makes it hard for us to breathe. So, Vandana says, the corporates pushed into the forests and created the pandemic, turned food into a commodity and created hunger. It's not like we're not growing enough food, but when you look at the GMO soil of Amazon or Argentina, 90% is for biofuel and animal feed. Then the issue of the destruction of livelihoods. During this last year, 40 to 50% of Main Street has been shut, while Wall Street has gained 40 to 50% in wealth. This is probably the biggest wealth transfer that has ever occurred in history. I'm using my hands a lot today, I realize. It's an Italian thing. Vandana says this is due to how we have redefined the economy. That if people work, something is unproductive. So get rid of people. Then you have efficiency of production. Vandana calls this the fossilization of our minds and our hearts. When you believe in substitution, if we continue on this path, which is the path of colonialism, then the apocalypse is inevitable. We have 10 years to make a change. Otherwise, the conditions on this planet will make it impossible to live. Maybe that's how we go. Only we can change that. But what we need to stop is being in fear. So Yogi Bhajan, who was the guy who brought Kundalini Yoga out of secrecy. I'm going to play this video of Yogi Bhajan explaining just what's going on planet Earth.
History became legend. Legend became myth. And some things that should not have been forgotten were lost. Until...
Under the earth, about 20-21 miles down, there's a couple miles wide magnetic iron, molded iron, which moves in a speed and creates the velocity and create a magnetic field, the magnet. Because of that magnet, we can live. Because of that magnet, the rain can happen. Because that magnet, the weather is. The whole thing is based on that magnetic field. Between sun and that magnetic field, so long there is a relationship, life is there. When there's not, it's not going to be life, period. There's no big deal.
I love that. There's not going to be life. No big deal. Right? Because of the magnet. That is the best thing. What the fuck is that? There's always something going on in this neighborhood. Sorry, there's just some... Okay, that's enough. So back to Vandana's book, Soil Not Oil. She talks about an emergency UN meeting that happened in 2008 to address the climate and food crisis, and how the same corporate interests that created the crisis were trying to offer the cure. More fossil fuel-based chemical fertilizers, more non-renewable genetically modified and hybrid seeds, bred to respond to the intensive use of chemicals, more corporate control of food, and more globalized trade. The food crisis reflects a deeper crisis: the creation of redundant or disposable people, which creates the potential of violence and social and political instability. Vandana goes on. Disposability of people is built into the denial of food to millions, as well as the destruction of livelihoods. The very definition of productivity in the industrial paradigm is labor productivity. If fewer humans are involved, the more productive a process is. even if it uses more energy and more resources and produces less, because that's what's really going on. It's sick. It's a disease. In an article that she wrote in October 2020 called Bill Gates' Global Agenda and How We Can Resist His War on Life, Vandana talks about how in March 2015, Bill Gates showed an image of the coronavirus during a TED Talk and told the audience that this is what the greatest catastrophe of our time would look like. The real threat to life, he said, is not missiles, but microbes. When the coronavirus pandemic swept over the earth like a tsunami 5 years later, he revived that war language, describing the pandemic as a world war. She goes on. Gates said, the coronavirus pandemic pits all of humanity against the virus. Vandana, of course, counters this because she's a G. She says, no, the pandemic is not a war. The pandemic is a consequence of war, a war against life. The mechanical mind connected to the money machine of extraction has created the illusion of humans as separate from nature. And nature is dead, inert raw material to be exploited. But in fact, we are part of the biome, and we are part of the virome. The biome and the virome are us. When we wage war on the biodiversity of our forests, our farms, and in our guts, we wage war on ourselves. The health emergency of the coronavirus is inseparable from the health emergency of extinction, biodiversity loss, and the climate crisis. All of these emergencies are rooted in a mechanistic, militaristic, anthropocentric worldview that considers humans separate from and superior to other beings we can own, manipulate, and control. All of these emergencies are rooted in an economic model based on the illusion of limitless growth and limitless greed, which violate planetary boundaries and destroy the integrity of ecosystems and individual species. New diseases arise because a globalized, industrialized, inefficient agriculture invades habitats, destroys ecosystems, and manipulates animals, plants, and other organisms with no respect for their integrity or their health. We are linked worldwide through the spread of diseases like the coronavirus because we have invaded the home of other species, manipulated plants and animals for commercial profit and greed, and cultivated monocultures. As we clear-cut forests, as we turn farms into industrial monocultures that produce toxic, nutritionally empty commodities, as our diets become degraded through industrial processing with synthetic chemicals and genetic engineering, and as we perpetuate the illusion that earth and life are raw materials to be exploited for profit, we are indeed connecting. But instead of connecting on a continuum of health by protecting biodiversity, integrity, and self-organization of all living beings, including humans, we are connected through disease. Just meditate on that. And we don't need to, okay? We don't need to listen to these sick fucks. She says we have two choices. We can make a nature-centered, people-centered transition to a fossil fuel-free future with meaningful work and decent and dignified living for all. Or we can continue on our current path toward the market-centered future, which will make the crisis deeper for the poor and the marginalized and provide a temporary escape for the privileged. So, Bezos, Zuckerberg, Gates, Mother Earth don't give a fuck about your bullshit no more, okay? She's like, I'm sick of your shit. You think you can do this? You think you can reign this tyranny for too much longer? Check yourself. Everybody's going on about how they want things to return to normal. And they believe that if they follow the protocols of the government, what the government is laying down, that things will go back, that they'll get back what they lost. No, they're only going to take more. Because what the fuck was Bill Gates doing at a meeting of Toronto mayors? This shit really gets me pissed. Remember the Black Snake prophecy? You have two choices. Follow the Black Snake or go back to Mother Earth, back to the Red Road. This is our responsibility as human beings, as stewards of the land and as brothers and sisters. Thank you, and until next time, buy local, eat local, be local, support small business, stop buying from Amazon now. We're going to be called to do extraordinary things shortly. So be ready. 2021 in White Tantric numerology is the number 5. The number 5 is our physical body in the Kundalini Yoga system. They have a 10 body system where the physical body is just one. It's brilliant. We'll get into it another time. So the directive for 2021 is to make your body strong like a warrior. And 5 is also the 5th chakra, the throat chakra, which is all about communication and the truth. So get your bodies and your throats toned. We can take back our land. We can be sovereign with the earth and stop the terrorization of a couple of technocrats who have no respect for life. So we'll end with this bit of wisdom from our indigenous peoples. We don't inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. Thank you. And until we meet next time, take it easy.